If you are coming in rip-roaring labor, I'm not gonna have a chance to really ask you and dig into the nitty-gritty of what you might prefer for your birth. So if you have it written out for me, that can be really, really beneficial. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Elizabeth. I am a labor and delivery and postpartum nurse, as well as a certified childbirth educator and mom to 3 babies. And today I wanted to come at you with a video that I think is going to be really, really helpful for you in your preparation to labor, birth, and parenthood journey. And that is how to write your birth plan or your birth preferences. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. But if you like this video, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share with all of your pregnant friends, as well as head on over to my Instagram where I give you more tips and tricks to have the labor and birth that you are hoping for. When we are talking about writing a birth plan, you may have heard that term before and heard a lot of negative things about it. That if you hand a birth plan to your nurse, they're gonna roll your eyes, they're gonna get you ready for a C-section, right? The longer the birth plan, the faster we go to the OR. Maybe you've heard that before, or maybe you've heard that you can't really plan birth, so why even try? And to both of those things, I wanna say, no thank you. Because I think there has been a big shift in the birth world community for a lot of your providers, your OBs, midwives, and nurses, recognizing the importance of listening to their patients and their preferences for birth. So instead of saying birth plan, I do prefer the term birth preferences. So what I think that does is it takes us from trying to plan out each thing in minute detail to saying, okay, if this were to happen, this is what I want. These are my top goals. This is how I'd like to achieve them. Here is what you need to know about me. Here's how you can best support me to have the birth that I'm hoping for. Because we cannot control everything with birth. And in our type A structured planned society that we currently live in, sometimes it's really hard to not hold on to wanting to have ultimate control, and we simply can't. But what we can control are a lot of the things that we might prefer with our birth. Maybe we prefer dim lighting. We'd prefer to have a doula there with us for support. Maybe we would prefer to have an IV, or we'd prefer to have an epidural. Maybe we would prefer to have a planned cesarean birth, right? There are a lot of things that we can prefer with our birth preferences that we can communicate with our nurses and our hospital staff to make our birth go as smoothly as possible. And while we might not be able to hit every single check mark on your birth preferences list, I think providing your support staff with a list of things that you would prefer is going to help them best meet your needs, particularly if you are coming in rip-roaring labor. I'm not gonna have a chance to really ask you and dig into the nitty-gritty of what you might prefer for your birth. So if you have it written out for me, that can be really, really beneficial. Before we even start writing our birth plans and our birth preferences, I encourage you, instead of going to Google and Googling a template, do some research on birth. You're already doing it because you are watching this video. Thank you for that. But I really encourage you to take a birthing class. And in fact, I might encourage you to take 2 separate birthing classes. Hear me out. I really recommend, if you are delivering in a hospital, that you take a birth class provided by the hospital so that you can then know what is offered at that hospital that you might want for your birth. Do they have a tub? Can you have a water birth at your hospital? Do they have the equipment for nitrous oxide in labor? Is there a time frame where it's like past 8 centimeters at this hospital, you can't get an epidural, or past 6 centimeters, you can't get narcotics through your IV? Things that are important to know because they're gonna shape the care at the facility where you deliver. Now, I do think some hospital birth classes really are quite short, and what they're doing is they're trying to teach you how to be a good patient. That's not your job to be a good patient for them. Your job is to focus on birthing your baby. If you take this birth class from the hospital and you're feeling like they're not giving you any coping measures, they're not helping you practice positions, they're not going through different stages of labor, what you might feel and experience, and kind of giving you the really broad rundown of what's going on, that's when a second birth class is probably going to be beneficial for you. Now, there are a ton, so many online that you can do. If you can find one in person, I really think that's beneficial as well. But you might just watch all of my videos on YouTube, and that might give you the knowledge that you feel you need to be prepared. So Doing some research on birth is going to be important so that you know what the options are, you know then also what's available at your hospital, and you can kind of make your lists and preferences on what feels good and right for you. Now, when we're starting with the birth plan, I think it's great if we just do like one page, maybe front and back, but just one page, ideally just on the front, to hit the high points and the bullets of what you're looking for with your birth. And on that piece of paper, the very first thing that I would love to have on there as a birth provider is your name and your preferred name. What do you like to go by? And also the name of your partner or anybody else who will be in the birth with you. My goal as your birth provider is to make sure that you don't feel like another number. You don't feel like another person who's just on my list, right? I don't like calling people mama, dada, daddy, mommy, mom, dad. I like to use your name, and I like to use your preferred name because I think that that helps you feel safe, secure, and know that I am on your team and you are important to me because you are. So names are the very first thing. The next thing that you can have on your birth preferences list is a little bit about yourself, right? It doesn't need to be really long. Mine would be like, hey, I'm a labor and delivery nurse. My husband does engineering. He's a little bit more nervous about this than I am. We really love X, Y, and Z. We're really excited to have you as our nurse, or whatever. So knowing just a little bit about you and where you're coming from, your background with birth, is going to be really beneficial. In this, you might also say, I'm hoping to have an unmedicated birth with as little intervention as possible. We'll go and dive deeper into that later in our birth preferences, but that might be something that you want to put there. The next thing on your birth preferences that takes a little bit of work from you to go into it, but I think is so helpful and probably the most important thing on this list of things for me to see as your nurse is I want you to explore about birth, about childbirth, about pregnancy, about postpartum. What makes you feel really nervous? What makes you feel really anxious? How does your personality deal with feeling nervous and anxious? Is there any past traumas that I need to know about? And obviously you don't need to expunge on great detail. If you've had a past sexual trauma, you don't even need to say that. But what you might say is, I would really prefer before you touch my body that you always let me know and never touch my body without asking, right? I've had a patient who was a war veteran and her request was, hey, please don't shut the door all the way. When you open the door, that loudness of the door opening is really triggering to my PTSD. I've had patients before say, I have a lot of anxiety. I want to know everything that you're doing. Conversely, I've had patients before say, I have a lot of anxiety and I don't want to know what's going on. Please turn down the fetal heart rate monitor. Make sure that I can't see it. I don't want to know. Thank you, thank you. I've had patients before who have suffered loss. And so they didn't want anybody to ever say, your body's doing exactly what it needs to do, or your body and your baby know what they're doing, because she felt like in the past her body didn't know what it was doing to keep her baby safe. So she didn't want to hear that term. So I think if we can look at and explore things that make us anxious, things that might bring up feelings of past trauma in our pregnancy, and kind of try to remove those from the birthing space, we can do our very best to keep you feeling safe, secure, and loved. All of those things are going to help our hormones go up, our pain go down, and our baby come out easier and faster. So that is the most important thing that I want you to talk about and explore with your partner when you are preparing for birth, more than do you want intermittent auscultation or continuous, which is important as well. But most importantly, I want you to explore, what are your feelings surrounding birth? What are you anxious about? And how can we as your hospital staff serve you and make sure that you are feeling safe, loved, and secure? Going from that, and why I think it's really great if you have taken a labor class, is going through all the different labor coping tools that you are hoping to use. So that might be your breathing, maybe some hydrotherapy, maybe a double hip squeeze, different positions that you would like to try that you think that you would like in labor. And yes, these preferences might go out the window when you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to try any of these things. And that's okay. But knowing that you have a list of things printed off somewhere that we can refer back to help you refocus and recenter can be really useful in birth. So then again, when we're talking about delivery, I think it's important that we talk about what positions you think you might want to deliver in. What you want the environment like when you're pushing. Do you want somebody counting for you? Maybe you think counting would feel really, really helpful. Or maybe you just like encouraging words. Or maybe you want everybody to be quiet. And maybe you're not sure and you're going to figure it out in the moment. That is okay too. Knowing that maybe you'd like to change positions every 15 minutes when you're pushing can be something great to put in your birth plans and preferences list. What are our plans then going from that for what different pain managements we would like to utilize. Now you may go in thinking, I want to do nitrous and that's it, or I want nothing, or I want the epidural as soon as I get there. And those are all things that we're going to take into account with our preferences when we're getting things ready for you and for your birth, and how we interact with you during your birth, trying to best meet those preferences. Now you might come in thinking that you did not want an epidural, and you might change your mind with getting the epidural, and that is a-okay. That's why these are called preferences versus a plan that is set and carved in stone, because you've never been in labor before, and you've never been in labor before with the baby that's currently in your belly. So you don't know exactly how that's going to feel and how that's going to affect you, and when you're moving from coping to suffering. But my goal is to support you in your choices that you're making in the moment and the choices that you've made before birth, so that you feel like you're really being supported when we pivot and shift in our birth plans and preferences. Now, we've talked a lot about what a birth plan and preference sheet would look like for somebody who's just coming in labor. If you're coming in with the induction process, so it's great if you think about all the different medical procedures that you may or may not consent to. And of course, consent should always be asked for in the moment before things happen. But for example, you might say, I would really prefer to not have my water broken until the baby is in a good position and my labor is well established. Or you might say, hey, I would actually prefer, as part of my induction of labor, to have my water broken before they start Pitocin, because I would like to be upright and being able to be mobile. Those are two very valid plans, and you are going to figure out what works best for you in the moment, but it's nice to have that research background on those medical consents. Other things that you might talk about is the use of episiotomies, vacuums, and forceps. When would you like those used? When would you not like those used? And what other alternatives would you prefer? Particularly with a vacuum and forceps, you might say, I would like no assisted delivery, and if that is something that needs to happen, I would rather move to a cesarean birth. So I think having that, of course, we're still going to have a conversation in the moment, but it's what you think is safest and best for you before birth. The next thing that it's really important to kind of prepare for, just because of the nature of birth, right, that it's unpredictable. Most of us don't go into birth planning on having a cesarean birth, but for about a third of people in the United States, they will have a cesarean birth. So kind of thinking and planning out how you would like a cesarean birth to go. Would you like the clear drape so that you can see your baby being born? Would you like to do skin to skin in the OR? Would you like to have your partner stay with the baby if there is a need for you guys to be separated? All of these things are things that you might include when you're thinking about your preferences for a cesarean birth. And this is again why taking a hospital class might be helpful, so that you know, do they have a clear drape available at your hospital? What are their policies for how many people can be in the operating room, etc. Now, we've talked a great deal about labor and a great deal about birth, but the next thing that we definitely want to include in our birth plans and preferences is, what about the placenta, right? So our baby has been born, and there are a few things that are going to be kind of hanging out until the placenta is born. One, we've got that umbilical cord. Do you want delayed cord clamping? Most hospitals do about 30 to 90 seconds as their standard. That is what's recommended by ACOG. We know that delayed cord clamping gives babies a burst of red blood cells that are going to serve as their iron stores for the next 6 months of life until they start solids. So if you would like delayed cord clamping, definitely list that. If you want a greater period of time than what's standard, list that as well. And then that's something that, again, your nurse can refer back to and remind the physician of after delivery. Now, the other thing is dealing with the placenta. So we've cut the cord now, the placenta is being born. What do you want to do with that placenta? I really encourage you, if you want to take a peek at that placenta, definitely put that in your birth plans and preferences. Maybe that you want a picture, you want to see what it looks like. I love placentas. I think they're so cool. I love explaining them. Are you planning on taking your placenta out of the hospital, whether it's to ingest it, bury it under a tree, or donate it to search and rescue, because they can use the placenta for that? Those are all things that we'd like to know about going into the birth, because we need to make sure that we have a safe place to put that placenta, and somebody comes and collects it pretty quickly to get it out of the hospital, because it is tissue that needs to be refrigerated or in another way kept cold. The next thing that we want to consider is feeding plans. What is your goal for feeding your baby? How would you like to feed your baby? Are you planning on exclusively pumping from birth, breastfeeding from birth, offering formula, doing a combination of any of those things? Definitely something for you to let us know. The next thing when we're talking about babies that we want to think about are, what are the routine newborn medications? This is erythromycin eye ointment to prevent eye infections, particularly from chlamydia and gonorrhea. This is vitamin K, which is an injection of this vitamin that gives your baby the ability to help their blood clot, to reduce the risk of random bleeds in the brain and the gut and other areas that can be life-threatening to your baby. And this is the hepatitis B vaccine. Would you like those given in the hospital? Would you not like them given in the hospital? Definitely some things to research, and I will list some resources down below, particularly for the vitamin K, that I think is really, really important and beneficial. Evidence-Based Birth has a really good resource on that I encourage you to look up. And then, do you want your baby to stay with you 24/7 in the hospital? Some hospitals kind of require this, some have a nursery. So you could put that in your preferences, where you would like your baby to be. Would you like your baby to get a bath in the hospital? Would you like a delay in that bath? Would you like no bath? Would you like to do the bath with the nurses later on? All things to consider. And then the last thing to consider is our postpartum preferences. And so these for you may include things such as getting your IV out as soon as possible. These for you may include getting up and moving, or you'd like a 24-hour discharge after delivery, or you would like limited visitors or anything of that nature. Definitely something for you to let us know if you have any specific postpartum preferences. We're talking about birth plans and preferences. Know that it's okay if things change from your preferences. Know that really building your birth plan and preferences lists and sheets are about communicating with your provider and about doing research to figure out what is in your mind going to work best for you before birth. But sometimes things change, and that's okay. We're here to support you and help you make decisions, whether things do a complete 180 or things go perfectly to plan. So let me know what you included in your birth plans and preferences, whether they were written or just something that you had in your mind. And until next time, bye guys.